Well guys, this is a second video in a series of videos I'm going to make of about changing all the fluids in this truck and just getting it up to speed. Kind of doing a little mini restoration, bring it back to spec. And I found the reason why the power steering is making a little bit of noise. It's very simple. It's just simply low on fluid. As you can see, try to shine a light in there, it's so low you can see the top of the steering pump itself. You shouldn't be able to see the metal pieces in there, the metal components in there. So it's just low on fluid. I'm going to go ahead and add more fluid and just to buy me some time, and then later on, I don't know if I'll do it today, I'll go ahead and flush the whole power steering out with some really good fluid. But for now, I'm going to use the Type F ATF here. That's the right fluid to use for this truck. I'll go ahead and top that up, and then we'll change the oil. Well guys, I was going to show you how to drain the oil. I'm almost done. I went to take out this bolt to get a sample of the oil, which I have right over there, and the bolt came out and fell into the drain pan. The oil started draining, so I couldn't show you guys. So anyway, it's all drained. You basically just loosen this bolt here with a 16mm socket and just let it drain your container, and then put the bolt back in and clean it up. And now we'll move on to getting off the oil filter. So here we are in the front of the truck, and right there is the oil filter. And because it has an oil cooler, the oil filter is actually more toward the frame than on the F-150 or an Ford truck without an oil cooler. So that makes getting the filter a little bit more challenging, because the standard filter wrench that I have just simply will not fit up in there. The band is too wide to fit up in there and loosen it. So I had to resort to using this strap tool, and basically the filter was kind of hard to get off because it was put on there extremely tight from before. I'm not sure why people love to do that, but anyway, if you guys can think of a better tool that's easier to use than the strap, I'd love to hear it. So far it's loose, and all we got to do is just loosen it some more, a little bit like that. Let some of the oil drain out. Hope you guys can see. I've done oil change videos before, but I don't think I've done one with a spin-on filter. Did one for the Mercedes, and actually the old Mercedes and new Mercedes. This ought to be the same. Just let that drain a little bit to minimize the mess. Got it catching in a can down below. And we'll go ahead and zoom out and then loosen it all the way. Take it out. Man, it's really tight in here. I can barely get my fingers in there. Keep it vertical as quickly as you can to minimize any spillage, and work it on out. You can see the distortion. The oil filter took a pretty good beating by using the strap because it was on there so tight. And the filter's been on there for a long time. It's a Napa Gold filter, so that means it's probably a Wix, which is good. That's a good brand to use. And judging by the amount of rust on there, it's been on that truck for a long time. I'm glad I've changed the oil on this thing. But looking at the inside and everything, doesn't look all that bad. But I went ahead and took a sample of the oil, just like I always do for all the vehicles. And that's sitting right there. And I expect, because of the cracked PVC tube and the age of the oil, I'm going to have elevated silica, basically dirt, in the engine, and maybe a little bit of elevated iron, elevated tin, because of the increased wear because of the dirt, and probably some higher oxidation numbers. But getting a sample of the original oil is really going to help this truck tell a story. It already told one story about the accident it was in, and by analyzing the oil, I'm going to get a very clear picture of the internal condition of this 351 Windsor motor, which I think is going to actually be in pretty good condition. But there's nothing like making a quantitative analysis of it just for peace of mind, and to start this on a oil analysis regimen. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and prep the new filter and get that put on. Now that I got the new filter, I'm going to go on there with the Valvoline filter that you typically use. One of the things you'll notice is it comes in a protective bag to keep it clean inside. And what I like to do before I put the filter on, actually, is try to fill it or pre-charge it with a little bit of oil. I've done this before on the Mercedes cars I've done. They have cartridge filters, that's a little bit more difficult, but the spin-on filters are just a tad easier. So I just dump a little bit of oil in the center part of the filter, that's the output part, and just let it soak up as much oil as it can. And it takes a little bit of time. You don't want to put too much in there, because when you go to tilt it over, you don't want the oil spilling out. And now we'll take a little bit of the oil and we'll lubricate the O-ring gasket on here. Actually, I could just use some oil inside the filter. Just put a liberal coating of oil on there. So I'm going to continue filling this thing up and see how full I can get it, and then go on the truck with it. Well, the new filter is installed now. I was going to show you guys the process, but it really kind of took two hands to work it up in there without spilling any of the oil out of it in such a small confined space. But one of the things I noticed is that filter is a little bit smaller. So I think in the future I will be able to work the oil filter wrench on there quite easily and not have the same level of difficulty anymore of getting that off. Kind of strange, you compare the new filter to the old filter, and the new one is a little bit shorter. I'm not sure if that's the wrong filter that was on the truck or if it's just dimensionally inaccurate. But anyway, oil change basically is finished. I'm just going to go ahead on and put some new oil in there. I'm going to switch it over to the little bit higher viscosity 1040 with high zinc for increased anti-wear, full synthetic. And I'm just going to dump it right in there. It takes 6 quarts for a full oil change. And go ahead and do an oil analysis and see what kind of condition that engine's in. Okay, now that I've got the oil added, got all 6 quarts dumped in the engine, let's go ahead and crank it over and keep an eye on that oil pressure gauge and see how long it takes it to come up. Almost instantaneously, not bad for a complete change. But I'm going to go ahead and let this thing run a little bit. Check for leaks. No leaks at the drain plug. And looks like we've got no leaks at the filter. It's a little bit wet from where it leaked out before. So we're good there. I'm going to let it warm up a little bit and then shut it down and then check the oil level and top off if I need to. And I want to say something a little bit about the oil pressure gauge in these Fords. It's not really a true gauge. If you can see right there where I got that screwdriver, that's actually nothing more than an oil pressure switch. It's either on or off. And that's really irritating because with a design like that, the oil pressure gauge is either right in the middle of normal all the time or all the way to the left where it says L. So it's like having a dummy light that's constantly on. This oil pressure gauge does not, it doesn't fluctuate as I rev the engine up as a normal gauge would. Like you've seen in the Mercedes and the 72 Lincoln. So it's, I feel a little bit duped. I mean, I kind of knew that the Fords were designed like that. I'm not sure why they put an oil pressure switch in there instead of a sending unit. That car actually has a sending unit, which is a variable resistor that varies with the oil pressure, and the gauge goes up and down as the engine speed increases and decreases, or the oil temperature increases, it'll go down. So I think that's a little bit dishonest. If you have a full gauge cluster like that, they ought to actually be true indications of what's going on in the engine, and not just basically a dummy light that's on constantly. But I might think about putting an actual sensor in there, then finding a way to recalibrate that gauge to make it read true oil pressure. By the way, I just filled up with gas. Let me check the rear tank. Good. I'm not going to have to replace a tank sending unit again, which is really a blessing. That's a hard job. I'm going to go ahead and switch to the front tank again. And we're running good. And that oil was really old, just almost pitch black. So the rust on the filter along with the black oil tells me that oil has been in there for a long time. So this engine was long due for an oil change. I'm trying to help it along as best I can by using the synthetic oil. Give it the good stuff so I can get a lot of life out of this thing. So it sounds really quiet. Gotta love these 351 Windsors. They're good motors. Anyway, I'm gonna go ahead. Next thing I'm gonna do is address this PCV leak here. Now I've got nice fresh oil in the engine. I'm gonna change out the breather element inside the air box, as well as the air filter itself. And this is really well made. It's actually bolt screwed down with screws instead of clips. So I gotta get this all unscrewed and see what lurks behind. So anyway, Let me go ahead and get a screwdriver and get that off, and I'll be right back. Well, now I got the PCV system all repaired, so that this hose has good integrity. It's not going to let any more dirt get ingested into the engine. This hose was a donor hose that came off of some similar tubing from an F-150 I found in the junkyard yesterday. And right here is the original hose with a big split in it. So that fit in there very well. So I opened up this air box. It's held down by 4 screws. And there's further evidence of neglect on this thing. I think I remember saying that this might have been the original breather element, just due to the amount of corrosion and everything on the clamp that holds it in. And when I opened up the breather, or the air cleaner, I found the breather just laying in the bottom of the air cleaner. It's been on there for so long, the adhesive basically disintegrated, dried right out, cracked, and let go. And it's just been sitting in the bottom of the air box like that for I don't know how long. So even without the crack in the hose over there near the valve cover, it would have been getting unfiltered air because of this problem. So that tells me nobody's been in this air box in a long time. They would have seen this and hopefully addressed it, but it's just amazing how many people just don't even think about these kinds of things. So I'm going to go ahead and clean this air box out. I unfortunately do not have a breather element for it yet. That's one of the things I forgot to get at the parts store, but I'll get that tomorrow. And here's the filter that was in it. At one point, somebody actually, I guess, was concerned about performance. This appears to be a K&N air filter or equivalent, some kind of wet gauze type of oil filter or air filter. I'm not a really big fan of the reusable filters, and this is one of the reasons why. If you don't keep up with it and wash the filter out and apply more tack oil to it, it's not going to filter very well. And it looks like nobody took care of this thing. That breather element's just something I've never seen before. And I'm going to try to make a little comparison here. Hold these things up. The new filter, which is a paper filter, compared to the original filter. And this is why I'm not a really big fan of the wet gauze filters. You can just see, if I can get toward the sun, you can just see how much light gets let through. If I hold this up to my eyes, I can actually see where I'm going and walk around the yard, compared to the paper filter, which is not letting any light through. So the paper filter is going to be a little bit more restrictive, but it's going to protect the engine a lot better, and that's really what it's supposed to do, is protect the engine. I'm not really interested in making a race car out of this thing. You know, if I want high performance, I've got that car over there, the SRT8. But for this thing, I'm going to go ahead and stick with engine longevity and durability versus performance. So, kind of hard to do with one hand, but I'm going to go ahead and stick that new filter in there and button it down and go for a little test drive. I hope this video has helped you guys evaluate your car and pay particular attention to the PCV system. It's an often very neglected system, and what you want to do, and what I'm going to do once I get the engine running, is see if I can feel a vacuum being drawn through this hose. This is the inlet hose. The PCV valve, which I'm pretty sure has never been messed with because it's just really hard to get to, is under the intake plenum, way back toward the back. If that valve is clogged, it draws vacuum right here from the engine. If that valve is clogged, then I'm not going to be feeling any air being drawn through there. So that'll let me know where I need to focus my attention next for PCV. So anyway, I hope this video has helped you guys, and I'll be making more videos of this truck as I as it goes through its shakedown phase, and as I do more maintenance on it to get it in good condition.